This is the Fifth Estate winning headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 13th of April 2020 and I am 2J.
I'm Tom.
And I am DM. Let's take a look at today's headlines. Yeah. On the Daily Nation, virus, Kenya faces a tough second month. The Standard, the traitors. And finally on the Star, KCPE and KCSE exams likely to be pushed back.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's start with the Star. They're telling us exactly what the headline is saying.
Yeah.
It's very elaborate as usual. Educators are predicting that the lockdown could eat into the second term of primary and secondary school years.
Yeah.
And so obviously that will have an effect on the national examinations that are supposed to start in, I think, October.
Yeah.
They're also telling us that CS Magoha and his PS Belio Kipsang are in conversations with consultants to chart a way forward and to see what it is that they'll do differently, given how COVID-19 is affecting education this year.
Yeah.
The way I look at it, it's not a calamity. The whole world, all the children in the world are going to, and students are going to be held back a year. So
we're all together.
We're all together. We'll start on the same plane. However, we are at a disadvantage, of course, as Kenya and perhaps Africa at large, because we are not doing on the online classes that the Western world are taking. We have limited access to internet learning.
But what does that tell us? I think this entire corona situation has told us that we need to invest very seriously in the country. We need to invest in healthcare, and we also need to invest in education. If another pandemic like this happens, we can't keep holding children back year after year after year. We have to have measures in place that can absorb these kind of shocks.
100%. And you know what? We also need to rethink our education system.
Yeah.
The way it is right now, a child or a student's education is predicated, focused on one singular seminal exam, which determines if they're going to move on to the next level. And it's not a measurement of learning. It's a measurement of memorization. So we have to think, what is it that we need to change in our education system? We have a three-part criteria that we use to analyze the headlines. For you, we ask, is the headline topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And finally, is it thoughtful or just plain lazy?
Yes.
This is a typical Star headline. It's
so definitely
too long.
Guys, I keep telling you, if it is not corona, if it is not murder, if it is not corruption, it is
education.
What is the Daily Nation telling us today?
The Daily Nation, virus. Kenya faces a tough second month. So I think as of today, this was day 31 of the first positive case of corona in Kenya. And so the Daily Nation is talking about how Kenya could actually be in for a very rude shock if infection and mortality patterns mirror those of other countries. So in this article, they specifically cite Spain as an example. And they say Kenya's first month of coronavirus is very similar to that of Spain's, which recorded 150 confirmed cases within its first month. But then thereafter, I think we all know what happened with Spain. Their country has reported 163,000 cases and 16,000 deaths. So I think the article is trying to, on one hand, just warn us a little bit that yes, as much as the cases in Kenya are seeming to look like a flattening of the curve, I think it might be a bit too early to say so. But at the same time, they talk about how Kenya was one of the very first countries to really clamp down, to have social distancing orders, to close schools, to have heavily, medical attention put in place. So I'm not really sure. On one hand, I think we should not be too quick to cheer. I think that this could turn sour very quickly. But on the other hand, I think the government did a very good job of very quickly putting measures in place. So
let me ask you guys. You see, yes, the trend shows that the number of infections could be going down, and it probably mimics the trends in Italy and Spain. However, I think there are probably other variables that we may not have thought. For example, is it possible that we experienced corona not in March but very early during the year, and maybe we have actually been we are sort of immune to it? Is it possible that we have other factors like immunization, this thing we call BCG, everyone has a mark over here, that because of that Africans in a way are able to fight this thing off better than everybody else? Maybe have we overreacted? Have we overreacted by saying total shutdown? And yet we can survive this thing better than others can.
I think when it comes to a pandemic like this one, there's no such thing as overreacting. We can never be too cautious. But I do think also that we had the benefit of time, because this thing played out in other parts of the world, and we had the benefit of foresight, we keep saying. So we saw how it could be for us. Unlike Spain and Italy, I think Kenya responded fast. We could have responded faster. We could not have allowed the aircraft full of from China. That was one of the things that we did wrong. But otherwise, I think that we did respond quickly compared to Spain, compared to Italy that let the football leagues carry on, for instance, and fans were out there even as late as the end of February and early March. And then there was the big feminist movement march in Italy. That had 300,000 people on the streets on I think it was the 12th of March. So there are those mistakes that we have avoided and the precautions that we have taken quite early on.
I would just say that I don't think people should celebrate just yet. I think, yes, as a first month, we have done incredibly well. But if you look at the trends of other countries, and I think trends are something that are significant to go by.
That's true.
Most countries start judging their cases from the 100th case. Very few countries look and say, it has been X amount of days since case 1. They look at 100 as that marker for where are we going to head from then on. So I think people should still be braced for who knows what.
Absolutely. So.
All right, on to the standard.
I was going to say onto the political pieces that we call cartoons. It's still on the headlines.
Standard. The Standard is, the title is The Traitors. And the Standard is pointing an accusatory finger at MPs for not having passed a single legislative initiative to save Kenyans from corona. And yes, I think it is fair to point an accusing finger at MPs first for them not even slashing their salaries, because a lot of that which would have gone into public, buying ventilators or buying masks or buying sanitizers, would have been chopped off from their salaries. But then again, also let's look at it this way. How much is enough? Because I think whatever bill they had passed, or they wanted to pass to cushion Kenyans, I think Treasury is very broke to do anything right now, and therefore. But
wouldn't you rather see your MPs fighting for something,
politically,
and then then having the pushback be that there is no money, rather than them not fighting at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's a political mandate. I mean, you need to be seen to be taking action on things that
matter to the people who elected
are a threat to Kenyans.
What better time to demonstrate leadership?
Yes.
And we've said this here before. The day of reckoning is coming. The day of judgment is coming for our leaders, not just political leaders, not just leaders in governance, but also leaders of industry. What will you have done for Kenyans now when we needed you the most?
Absolutely.
And the eternal damnation is going to be impeachment. It's going to be not patronizing your establishment.
The good thing is Kenyans, we have Warthog syndrome. We forget very fast.
Unfortunately. But if anything, I think it's a fantastic headline, The Traitors.
Yes.
I think it describes aptly who they are.
Absolutely.
So the Standard gives us our winning headline?
Yes.
The Standard gives us our winning headline. On to the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Just like the headlines, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to analyze them for you. We ask, is the cartoon humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And finally, is it effective or just plain lazy? What do we have in the Standard?
You have Gado, and Gado has caricature of William RUTO, the color singer, and Raila Odinga, and they have masks. And for RUTO is Vote RUTO 20. The mask is labeled Vote RUTO 2022. For Raila is Vote Raila 2022. And the caption there is, finally, they have also agreed to wear masks.
Is this suggesting that now Corona has made them shut up?
No, I think it's the sarcastic. Inverse. It's the inverse. They're using Corona as a campaigning platform or as a way of making themselves relevant. And I think this comes, Gado is coming hot on the heels of the national address that the deputy president gave us on, was it Thursday?
Yeah.
On Thursday.
And also the food distribution.
Stampede, yes.
In Kibera, you know.
Over the weekend, that's
over
true.
The weekend.
That was supposedly donated by Raila himself,
Yes.
Yeah. So they're not doing this out of, what he's saying is they're not doing this out of concern for COVID, but for themselves in 2022.
Absolutely.
What's the nation? What's on the nation?
Nation is IGA, and this one I like. IGA is fantastic.
Sorry, what did you say?
Iga, I like this cartoon by Iga.
Right.
TJ had a mental glitch.
That's the first.
This is the second time I've said I've liked his cartoon. It's a drawing of a Chinese guy, and he's there coughing like a nonsense. He's coughing racism, and is a drawing of coronavirus. Now, but for what he's actually coughing there is racism, and he's putting the mask, instead of putting the mask in his mouth, he's putting over above his eyes, he's putting on his eyes. And I think the Chinese government must be brought to order. They must be castigated for this. You cannot say that you're going to have quarantine for foreigners for 2 weeks, and the only people you single out are Africans. You know, I mean, have you seen a video of a Muzungu being taken out of a hotel? Or of an Arab being taken out of a hotel? It is all Africans. And here the thing is, African countries should actually sit down and leverage on this, because they should not waste a disaster. If at all your debt is in the hundreds of billions of dollars, you sit down and you say, you are the ones who have caused us economic meltdown. So how are you going to pay reparations for this? The best way is Africa and Europe and the West sit down and charge these Chinese fellows like a nonsense.
And I'd even want to correct the cartoon a little bit, because for me this is beyond racism, because I feel like racism is some kind of like systemic order that tries to suppress and oppress people. This is looking at Africans as being less than human. Saying that your money is not wanted here because yes, we created this disease, or this disease started here, but you may be the carriers.
But you can
of
take
it.
Yes.
So I think
it's so sad. Black people have no friends, huh?
Yeah, I mean, but also it's also upon us as Africans. This thing of smiling at every foreigner, you know, welcoming people, and you are at a disadvantage because economically you cannot sustain yourself.
You mean smiling to get a loan?
Yeah, to get a loan, to, you know, they piss me off.
Okay, the
that was
star.
The star.
Sorry, I got carried away.
It's okay to be allowed.
Ozone, and it's a drawing of fellows Africans in a tunnel, and there's a ray of light shining through a tunnel. But the ray of light seems like a corona one. Anyway, the caption is, "We too shall rise." And I think it's a ray of hope. This thing, nothing bad lasts forever. We will come out stronger from this. I mean, who would have thought we'd be doing over 1 million masks in production? Who would have thought we'd be doing 1 million liters in sanitizer?
And that's the beauty of a crisis sometimes. I think it forces you to go beyond what you think you could do. Who thought that Kenyans one day would have to make ventilators on demand? We're doing it. That we'd have to make masks on demand. We're doing it.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
I think good things.
I like that cartoon for being hopeful.
Yes.
I don't know what you guys think. Which cartoons?
I actually don't like the star because of what Tuam said, that the ray of hope
is corona.
Is the shape of corona.
I think I like the bashing by Iga of the Chinese, and I think we should go with that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Given the passionate way you described it, we're going to make it the winning head cartoon.
I think that is 2 weeks in a row that Iga has had the winning cartoon on a Monday.
So the Daily Nation gives us our winning cartoon. What is our final thought?
And now our final thought. It is inspired by the European Renaissance.
Yes, that's very true.
Yeah.
So this week, just as the conversation we've just had right now, is kind of looking at what positive things can come out of a societal crisis. And I think the European Renaissance is a perfect example of what can come out of a dark period. So this was a period from the 14th to 17th century, considered the bridge between the Middle Ages, which was also known as the Dark Ages, and modern history. So it started as a cultural movement in Italy in the late medieval period that later then spread on to the rest of Europe. So the word Renaissance is a French word which means rebirth, quite literally. So this period coincided with a boom in trade, in exploration, in marriage, diplomatic excursions, and even a lot of wars. So the Middle Ages is popularly viewed as a time when Europe made little intellectual and cultural development, and when the continent was gripped by war, by famine, and by disease. And this is a period when we see the Black Death taking place, as it had wiped out millions of Europeans. In fact, they said, some estimates, is that 1 in every 3 persons died in the years between 1346 and 1353. Therefore, we can see that Italy at this time was a very fertile ground for cultural revolution. But it can't be denied, however, that the thinkers and artists of both periods, the medieval and the modern history, they were using two different lenses to observe and understand the world around them.
Yes.
So during the Middle Ages, Europe was dominated by Christianity, and actually the Catholic Church, to be specific.
Right.
Its thinkers saw their work primarily as a way to glorify God. So a lot of their art was dominated by a lot of religious themes. But during the Renaissance, on the other hand, a concept known as humanism had taken hold in Italy and later spread throughout the continent. And one of the important principles that this promoted was the centrality of the human being. And it refers to the development of the human personality regarding man as the center of all human activity. So you see some of the famous intellectuals and artists who came out from this time, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, William Shakespeare, John Milton, Niccolo Machiavelli, Thomas Hobbes, just so many interesting and great people. So we see that even after it spreads past Italy, it reaches different parts of Europe. So you have the German Renaissance, which is notable for the printing press that was developed by Johannes Gutenberg. Later you see it spread to the UK, which coincided with the Elizabethan era, and we have William Shakespeare being one of the most famous writers coming out of that period. But naturally, like Tuam said, not all, I mean, you said all bad things come to an end. But at the same time, all good things also do come to an end. The Renaissance period did not last forever, and it eventually came to an end. So the reason you see it coming to an end, for one primary reason, is that trade had really been spurred during this time. And so after the 1500s, when Columbus discovers America, I'd say discover in quotation marks, because you cannot discover something that already exists. But after Columbus discovers the Americas, you see the new trade routes being shifted from the Mediterranean over to the Americas. So because of that, a lot of money that used to be concentrated in Italy and the Mediterranean area now shifts to other spaces, and that kind of killed that Renaissance movement. But I think that is a very brief history of the European Renaissance moment.
Very well put. And I want to say that without economic renaissance, there would not have been the European Renaissance. And here is why. There were three variables that enabled the economic renaissance to happen. First was a shift in the modes of production. Second was a shift also in banking and the trade routes or routes in Europe. And third was a comparative advantage in production as well. But let me begin with the shift in modes of production. You see, there was a shift from the agricultural mode of production to people moving from, from farmland to industries. There was a migration. So the migration was largely, people used to do peasant farming, so for subsistence. Then they moved to the town centers and industries so that they could earn a wage. It's the evolution from peasant farmer to proletariat. But what also that we also want to factor here was that the home of the Renaissance was largely in Italy, and this is because of the trade routes, and the trade routes was largely the Mediterranean Sea. Now, the city of Venice was home to the largest merchant ships that used to supply goods across Europe, but also as well, banking and finance was also home to Italy. Italian banks and German banks gave loan to merchants across Europe to start businesses. But they could not have started business without currency. And the currency came from a place called Florence in Italy. And this small little coin, and they call it the florin. The florin was accepted across the entire European continent. But I also want to speak to something called comparative advantage. Every single country in Europe had a role to play. There was a division of labor. For example, the Italians did arts and painting, and paintings, carvings, finance. You know, Spain gave Europe leather, olive oil, fruits and wines. England, imagine of all things, they gave wool. She had, but also to make fabric across Europe. The French sold grain and linen to England. Literally, everybody had a role to play to ensure that the Renaissance happened in Europe.
Tuam, do you know what your part has just reminded me? One of the most famous characters from The Merchant of Venice, written by William Shakespeare, is Shylock, right? And that is where the term Shylocks came from. You know, talking about money and finance.
That's true.
Sorry, that just a very random.
You know what else Tuam has reminded me of? Is the Bad Samaritans. You always tell us on the Bad Samaritans that comparative advantage is a lie. That is what is used to tell Africans not to make cars because it's not their comparative advantage.
You know, it's great you say that, because at some point Italy could not do the paintings, could not do the printing press, and the French took over and the Germans took over. So once you were not able to do something, someone else took it over from you and probably did it as a much better job.
To wrap it up, I'll just make reference to something that Tujay said, which is that before a birth, there's death.
Yeah.
And the death that happened before the European Renaissance was massive. A third of the population was swept away by the bubonic plague, or the Black Death, as it is also called. This was in the 13th century, between 1347 and 1350. Now, the impact of the Black Death was so profound, and it resulted in wide-ranging changes, socially, economic, cultural, and religious changes. And it's actually seen as one of the things that directly or indirectly brought the Renaissance, the European Renaissance. So what I'd like to say is this: now that we're in the middle of a plague, or a mini one, hardship begets innovation. Survival births thriving. And I'll give 3 examples. During, even before I give the examples, the thriving is from the individual level, because I know so many people right now are worried about what the future looks like. We're facing an economic slump. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs. In fact, unemployment is going to be unprecedented on a global level. And countries at national levels are also going to suffer recessions. So, but after this pain and this death, there's going to be rebirth. 3 examples. One, on a personal level, a man called Jack Ma, Alibaba. After SARS, Alibaba went through a renaissance of its own, because like COVID, of course, there was the need for non-contact or low-touch economy, and SARS got Alibaba to be on its way to be the $470 billion enterprise that it is now. In fact, Jack Ma is the one who's coming to the rescue of a lot of people globally, including the West. Another one is a Chinese, more present, is a Chinese makeup manufacturer called Li Zingxuan. I don't know how to pronounce it. They wouldn't try to pronounce African words either. A cosmetic company that, because of COVID-19, had to close 40% of its stores. But then what they did in response is to change their structure. They took the people who used to work in the stores and made them online influencers on this platform called WeChat in China. Believe it or not, they registered 200% more sales than they did during COVID. Pre-corona, rather. And then finally, Sanofi, the French, I think it's French, pharmaceutical giant. During the recession, or after the recession, they took a big hit, just like all other companies in the world. And what they decided to do in response is to shift their money to R&D, to research and development. So from 900 million euros to 1.3 billion euros, they dedicated to R&D. And what this did for them is it put them heads and shoulders above their competitors. 5 years after the recession, not only were they ahead of their competitors, but they were also able to buy Aventis. Another huge company. So encouragement to all Kenyans and all people of the world. We will come out of it, and we will come out of it stronger than we were before.
That's true.
On a day when we had a winning headline from The Standard, and we had a winning cartoon from Iga of the Daily Nation. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also on your TV screens on Star Times, Go TV, and Pang Free to Air. Have a good evening and see you tomorrow.